Okay, we're rolling.
Well, this is the last day of that. Well, in fact, it's all over now. But this is the exhibition, such as it was, and to me, it seems vast. I've never covered so much wall space before. And having done this, hunched over the drawing board, each one over the years, it's quite mind-blowing for me. It's very much in your face. I hope some of these, the actual humour in the drawings, hopefully understated, but certainly when you see it coming at you like this from all directions, it's I find it most interesting.
Okay.
I never experienced anything like it before. See, it goes on and on. You think you get it over with now, you're into far more of it. That was Prisons International. Here we have prisons again, the environment. Flags, lunatic unionists, mad barking unionists, the big passion, the environment.
Okay.
But this is all newspaper stuff. Round here they have different stuff again. 17 years of Hearts and Minds, 16 drawings for Time. All hours on Wednesday night, went past in a few seconds, Hearts and Minds. A commission from Double Band, historical documentary on the extraordinary life of Castlereagh, the most hated man in both England and Ireland at the time.
Okay, and how did this show happen?
I was prompted by a colleague from the BBC Hearts and Minds, said it was about time I did something like this, and she was quite right. It's the first time I've ever seen my own work displayed in such a vast space. It has a strange effect. It's like the corners of your imagination are suddenly projected all around you, and I've never quite experienced the feeling before. I decided I opted for the Tile Warehouse School of Curation rather than being selective, partly because I am very indecisive.
And now, you started off as an architect, is that right? You went to school to study as an architect?
Yeah, I think it was slightly parental pressure. I studied architect. I qualified as an architect and worked as an architect in Scotland and in London. But I was working for Richard Seaford and Partners, who put up the Westminster Tower and Central Point. And it wasn't. It was frustrating. There wasn't enough drawing. I heard about these guys who made animated cartoon films at Soho, which sounded more interesting to me. So one lunchtime I went around to the Dog and Duck, the pub in Soho, where animators were supposed to hang out, and approached two guys who looked like animators, and turned out they were. So I went round and asked them if they knew of any jobs, and they told me a few places to go to. I went to, and eventually, not very long, I was working as an animator. And I had terrific confidence in those days. I reckoned I could do anything, and I managed to persuade the people who ran House and Bachelor that I could move straight in and work as an animator.
Okay. And that was in London, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Dog and Duck pub is where animators frequently are frequented. Okay.
Yeah.
And you, of course, were working on the cartoon series, The Jackson 5.
That's right. My first project in animation was what they call factory animation. It was a series about the Jackson 5. And they were the Jackson 5, and then Michael Jackson was not really any more prominent than any of the others. There's some really good people who worked on it. There was people from South America and all over the world, and the guy who was directing it was an American. We can ditch all this and as I get into it, maybe. You know what they did once for the BBC? They started and I couldn't say anything, so they went away, and I found a bottle of whiskey and demolished half of it. Okay. And when they came back, they thought I was wonderfully relaxed, and I totally changed. You don't have to have fast going, do you? No.
Okay.
The Dog and Duck was a pub in Soho where animators were reputed to hang out. I wasn't quite sure what sort of people animators were, but I was very interested in animation, drawings that moved. I've always been intrigued by the idea of drawings that move. Although I've rather gone off. I know now what hard work it is, so I'd rather softened my enthusiasm. But anyway, I went round one lunchtime. I was working at the time, as I say, for what I felt was very dreary work for Richard Seaford and Partners.
That was an architect, was it?
Yes, they were a big firm of architects. But I was working on multi-storey car parking for Wembley Stadium. And so I know a bit about stadiums and all the stuff that goes on here. I could talk quite a bit about that. But anyway, yeah, I was very confident in those days. I reckon I could do anything. I was God's gift to any sort of drawings or anything like that. So I said, any drawing, any work in animation. They said, there's a new series starting around the corner in Hallison Bachelor. It's called the Jackson 5. An American guy called Bob Bolser is directing it. So I called in and he was very pleasant, gave me a test. And then I badgered him day after day, and then they gave me work. And then I got work on other factory things, and then I got work in Canada. I went backwards and forwards to Canada a few times. And
in Toronto and Montreal, is that right?
Montreal and then in Toronto. Yeah, great fun. But didn't see much of Canada. They worked us pretty hard, but still great fun. And you see the same group wherever you go in the world, although I haven't been that many places. You walk in the door and it would be the same people sitting around the light boxes. Then I came back to London, worked in animation. I don't know, I was going to come back to Belfast. I'd always had a fancy in comics, so I fancied having a go at comics, which I did.
Was this the 70s?
Yeah, this would have been the 70s. There were two big companies running the comics centres, the British comic centres. These were the children's funnies, not the 2001. That was all still to come. So there was the Thompson of Dundee. I called there in Fleet Street. Their offices turned out to be just a loading bay for lorries. Everything happened in Dundee. All the artists then, nearly all, lived and worked up in Dundee. So that was there's no point in that. So I tried the other lot, IPC, and they took me in pretty quick. So I was able to come over here and work and send stuff off, but it became very repetitive and actually very hard work for not much money, I thought, but too repetitive. So, and I'd always wanted to do political cartoons. I'd always been political, well, since the 70s, when things started blowing up here, or even before that. When I was at school, I went to Inst, and we had a history master called Archie Douglas, who was an irascible guy from Greenock in Scotland who didn't always want to bother teaching us, so he would hand us out these bound volumes of Punch. 18th century, 19th century, still you could get them. You can still get 19th century punches more easily than you can get 20th century. But these drawings had such malice and vitality, and they were about issues and events that no longer occupied people, but you could feel the power, you could feel the intrigue, you could feel, as I said, the malice in these drawings, the aggression. And so ever since I saw those, at the back of my mind I thought I'd quite like to be a political cartoonist. It took a lot drifting around doing other things before I actually started doing it. But it is the best job I think I could ever have had. And it's super, you can say and shove your opinions down everybody else's throat. Okay. 4 times a week. It used to be 6 times, and get paid for it. Maybe not much, but something.
Okay. And how do you feel about the exhibition?
I think this is great. I've never seen my work on walls covering such an acreage of wall space as this. And it does give one a strange feeling. It's like the dark recesses of your mind and your imagination are suddenly brought out into the sunlight and all around you, not just for yourself to see, but everybody else to see. I've had so much stuff. I could have covered the ceiling and the floors and the stairway as well. I could have covered the dome of the Sistine Chapel and all the corridors leading up to it. So I had to make a selection, but as you can see,
the work is divided into collections. You do have some themes going on here. Like I can see there's environment behind you. Yeah. What other collections did you try to group the work into?
Originally I had it all sorted in Unionists, Nationalists, Republicans, dissidents, flag wavers, international, the Middle East, the Caucasus, America. But I was in such a turmoil at the beginning that I laid the drawings down in heaps around the foot of the wall space, and with the help of very willing people from the Crescent Gallery here, it all arrived on the morning before the opening. We just pinned them up fairly chaotically, so there are large swathes, large things that aren't represented here at all, but that means I can do another one. Well, I can do another completely different one. It may seem that this is unbalanced, and in a way it is, because there are far more, if you like, about mad flag wavers than there are about deadly dissidents. And I probably have as many of the other, and it just so happened. I had intended to come down and change them around, but I never did. I just left it as it was.
Okay, what are your earliest memories of drawing? Like, was drawing something you were always interested in from a very young age?
I've always had a fanaticism about drawing and wanting to do it. It just seems the most pleasant thing to do. My dad used to draw and paint a lot. He was very good too, although he worked as an engineer, sheet metal worker engineer, but he drew and painted, particularly people he sketched. Although he had ambitions to be a big landscape landscape artist, I think his strong point was portraiture and caricature too, which he did in and around Belfast. I mean, his drawings, I have hundreds of sketchbooks, including ones that he did in the Duke of York of Jerry the Barman, who he spent a lot of time in there. A lot of people knew him around town in the 50s, 60s and 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s maybe.
I believe those drawings are hanging inside, they're up on the wall in your home right now, is that right?
Some of them are, yeah. I mean, he was good friends with people like John Luke. Dad used to camp out with John Luke at Groomsport in the 30s in a tent, and they were both working in town, and they would both travel up by train. John Luke used to be a frequent visitor to the house, and I remember he had a Raleigh Dawn tourist bicycle, and if I came in the door in the hall and there was this green bike leaning against the wall, I knew John was in chatting to Dad, and I could hear the voices in one of the rooms which I stayed out of. He was a very shy guy, John. He always wore a hat, and it was only after years that he once took it off I realised he was bald. Also a guy who had very strange fads, which were, I think, probably fairly self-destructive. One of the ones was, I think, that he thought he could live without drinking anything, and he could absorb all moisture through leaves and salads and things like this. I started working for the Irish News in '89, about then I think it was. I just took a notion. Well, I think I had tried the Telegraph. I had done a few in the Telegraph when, not Frank Carson, it's only Carson. And then I drifted away and did other things. And then I thought I'd give the Irish News, because I thought probably my politics would be more in line with the Irish News editorials than with the Telegraph's. Not that I ever felt the Telegraph was restrictive, but Terry McLaughlin was acting editor, so he said, come in and we'll talk about it, which I did. And I started off doing a Saturday cartoon. Excuse me. I think I did pocket cartoons at first. I know I did pocket cartoons for a while.
Okay, what are pocket cartoons?
You know, tiny wee cartoons,
okay,
like Osbert Lancaster used to do, or Kipper Williams does.
Was this something independently you did on your own, or was it for...
Oh no, I did it for the paper. It's just they didn't give me the big spread that I have now, this sort of op-ed. And I found that, you see, I like to draw. I like often the idea to be conveyed by drawing, rather than the punchline. If possible, I think the sort of political cartoon, the sort that I like to do, would have no writing at all. It would be a drawing surrounded by copy. The European, or as I imagined, the European style, rather than the American or the British, which is the punchline, which is verbal. I like the purely visual. I still do. But I like punchlines as well, if they're good. But I like to be able to draw. I like a drawing to be atmospheric. I don't just want a punchline with a few lines around it. It's not like gag. I like the drawing to be as important as whatever is said.
Can you tell me about Blotsky?
Yeah. Blotsky, a lot of cartoonists, I don't know why I did that, but possibly I didn't want my identity to be out. I mean, after all, I started doing cartoons in the 70s when it was, well, I started before that actually, when it was a bit of an idea to keep your identity private. I called myself Blotsky. I was sitting actually not far from here with Brian Moore, who was Cormac of Amphibla and other places. He was a really good mate. I knew him before he started cartooning. Anyway, I was throwing around ideas. He was Cormac. I mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cormac, of course, passed away recently in 2011, I believe.
Indeed, yes. Yeah. Big shock.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was a close friend of yours.
He was, yeah. I mean, I used to combine with Brian Cormac in several strips in Fortnight magazine. It was Andy Pollock, I think, invited us to try out Ireland's first anti-clerical strip, or cartoon strip as it was. One prod me and one Catholic Brian. We were both long lapsed from both. We were, I think, both devout atheists at that stage, but we're talking about cultural clericism. That was great fun because.
And you signed your work as Kormsky, the two.
Kormsky, yeah. It was a combination of Cormac and Blotsky. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I guess there was a time when you found it necessary to maybe protect your identity. Do you mind if I ask you about, you felt like you've been threatened or in danger? And is that true, or
well,
did you feel like
I don't want to go into much detail. I have
Okay.
had a few scrapes, but I hope the people that felt whatever hostility have, I hope it's all long gone. I hope so. Yeah. Anyway, but I think I now have developed a kind of artist's license. I've had no trouble in the last quite a few years. In fact, I could do with a few more angry letters and papers. And I kind of feel nobody notices. I mean, I always feel envious of that Danish cartoonist who caused the embassies to burn. I mean, I get maybe one letter a year, and he does one cartoon, and half of the Western world is in flames. I don't know how he did it. It was a rubbish cartoon.
Okay. What's his name?
I've forgotten.
Okay.
Well, his cartoon was so poor that it was really 10th rate. In fact, it wasn't really what I would call a political cartoon. It was more like a racist poster. And also the magazine, the small circulation Danish magazine which produced it, acted very much in bad faith, since it had a few weeks previously commissioned a similar one about Christianity, and they didn't put it out because they thought it would be offensive. So it wasn't a brave, principled decision to put that one out. It was just a shoddy, sleazy publicity, populist move. Having said that, the reaction to it was totally out of order and totally out of proportion. The people in the East who rioted would never have seen it. They were told to go out and riot, so neither side in that comes out with much credit, I think. But it certainly put the whole job of being a political cartoonist in the spotlight for a few weeks.
Okay. Have you ever presented works to the Irish News where they thought, no, we can't do this?
Oh yes. There's some here, there's some. Not everything that's on these walls was accepted, but I'll not tell you which ones weren't. Yeah, it does happen. And I have to clear everything with the Irish News. I just read, actually, last night online that Steve Bell will not talk to the editorial staff of The Guardian, that he insists his stuff. This was a blog by, or not a blog, it was a piece by Martin Rosen, who is the other main cartoonist of op-ed cartoonist in The Guardian. They are the two, I think, the best operating now. They're both operating in the spirit of the 18th century, where everything hangs out. And Steve Bell, he takes no prisoners, as most people know, and I would love to be able to do that. But this is I work for if you like, a family newspaper, so I do have to clear everything. And quite often things my ideas don't go out.
So it's happened more than a few times where they've said, no, we can't.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. And sometimes, I mean, if I feel really strongly about something, I'll argue the whole afternoon. And give them a hard time to get it in. But generally, it's pretty good. We have a give and take. Excuse me.
No problem. And I know you sometimes work from your home in South Belfast, and I find it quite interesting, that whole process, how you create the work in your home and then you would sometimes have it delivered. Can you tell us about how you would transport your work to the Irish News offices?
Well, I used to take work in by bike, but now I've been, for quite a few years, I've been scanning, and then by taxi. That was ridiculous. I'm only just moving into the computer age now. It's great from the point of view of reference, but Google is a lot better than sackloads of clippings. I've still got some of the clippings just in case there'll be an earthquake or something and the internet will go down. But the people that I've clipped are long since out of circulation. Happily, I'm still in circulation. But yeah, I used to cycle in with it. Then it was delivered by taxi, and then finally, in the Irish News, decided it would be better to give me a scanner, which they did, and it's great.
Was there ever any close calls, like cycling into town to deliver your work, or trying to get there in time?
Well, it's like when I was drawing for comics, I got later and later until we both had I decided I couldn't do it anymore. And yeah, occasionally, I used to, when I was drawing at the beginning, I had this, there's this division in the brain of the verbal, the punchline and the drawing. And sometimes I would start off with an idea, and then I'd get sucked into the drawing, and I'd be cycling down with it, and I suddenly realised I hadn't actually put the punchline in, so I'd have to go in and draw it in the office. But yeah, that hasn't happened in a long time. In a sense, it's less stressful to be able to, well, obviously, to just turn to the scanner and put it in. Because then if I scan it and it looks wrong, I can quickly, if I'm not too late in the evening, I can adjust it slightly. And there's something funny, the colours that I put on don't look the same, but that's something for technology.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Have you ever received any fan mail?
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Shall I start again?
Yeah, fan mail. Have you ever received any? That's okay, it doesn't matter about the pauses.
Occasionally I get appreciative letters, and the paper forwards to me, and occasionally non-appreciative letters. It doesn't happen very often. I could do with more, actually. I think one of the things I did when I came in here was I accosted people that were looking at it, because I'm quite a fan of Bertolt Brecht, if you know Bertolt Brecht. In order to shortcut the fan mail, I'm quite keen on Bertolt Brecht, and other forms of art that deal with politics interest me. Political songs, plays and things like that. And the songs of Ewan MacColl, Woody Guthrie, Bertolt Brecht I'm particularly interested in, because Brecht was loved by, if you like, his audiences to such an extent that he seems to be able to steal other men's wives and things without them objecting. But he was one of the first kind of pop singers who enjoyed adulation. But he had this technique and this idea that he had to interact. He didn't just put on a play and then stand back. He would go to the people that were going into the theatre and say, what do you expect to see? And then when they came out, he would harangue them as to what they thought of it. And I'm not like that. I draw the stuff, but I would like to be a bit like that. So I asked a few of the people that were in here if the ones they liked and stuff they didn't like, and I quite enjoyed the exchange. I wish in a way I could get feedback. Any kind of feedback is better than none. So I get the odd letter, but not very many. I could do with a burning embassy, That would be really cheer me up. Or a riot. I've never produced a riot. Maybe next week. And then when there has been trouble, it's always come from something which wasn't intended, something I drew at the corner of the cartoon and not the main thrust. It would be great to have a great furore about my political theories and people who objected to them. Sadly, that was yet to happen. But I'm only young, only 70. It happened.
In '96, you started working with the BBC, doing Hearts and Minds. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I had, it was Seamus Kelters, who had become news editor who I had worked with in Irish News, was working in the news department at the BBC, and apparently he gave my name to Andrew Coleman, who was editing this new programme, Hearts and Minds, so that they decided in this format of a review of the week halfway through the programme, a sort of humorous review from a team of journalists. And I was brought in and given a tryout, and I quite liked it. So that was 17 years that went on, which was great fun. Exhausting, macho cartooning, since I had to work pretty much through the night, and it all passed by in a few seconds. But great fun. Both if I agreed with the subject matter I was illustrating, or if I didn't agree with it. It was particularly satisfying, if I didn't agree with it, to be able to subvert it by drawing images which gave a completely different idea than that which was intended. Subversion is great fun.
Okay. Can you tell us about this collection here?
Well, for some reason, I don't know, although I work for what would be normally considered to be a nationalist paper, most of the people who want to get originals tend to be unionists. I don't know. I haven't quite worked that out. I think, although it wasn't entirely intentional, there seemed to be a lot more unionists appearing on these walls in this exhibition than nationalists stroke Republicans. And I think that's because they tend to be, in a way, more colourful than other them. In fact, I'd say a much greater incidence of people who are obviously barking mad amongst the unionist community than otherwise. And there's kind of logic to what Republicans and nationalists do, which sometimes can seem a bit dull, whereas you have all these strange, very odd people within unionism, colourful, mad, wild, contradictory, and it makes probably for a more interesting cartoon.
Okay. Do you wish to tell us about some of your favourites?
Well,
I guess a lot of them are your favourites.
No, things come and go. I tend to like a good drawing, but I like a good drawing and a good idea, and I like it when I catch somebody who plainly recognisable and I've managed to change them put them in a situation that they wouldn't normally be in. I mean, this guy here, Nelson McCausland, is great fun. He seems to me to be totally barking mad, but that's not much stupid, just barking mad.
Okay, and which one is that?
Nelson McCausland.
Okay. Alright.
I find the whole amount of money has been... Oh, do you want it? Yeah.
Is that Michael Stone spewing from Paisley's mouth?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I came in too quick, did I?
Sorry?
I came in quick and said
no,
yes.
No, that's okay. It doesn't matter. We can still... I think it might be necessary to keep some of my questions there so people know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And have you ever met Ian Paisley face to face?
I never have, no.
Okay.
And he's never wanted to buy one of my cartoons. I've no great desire to meet him face to face at all. I'm not widely interested in him. I don't find him interesting. I think he's done terrible things, a malign influence, but not interesting.
Okay.
His innermost thoughts would be dreary, I think, in the extreme. Not interesting. Not a creative person at all.
Okay. And have you had any leading politicians speak to you about your work in person?
Occasionally I've spoken to them. I don't seek them out, and they tend not to seek me out.
Okay.
I would tend to avoid rather than approach them, because I don't want to make friends with the people I draw.
Okay, so you haven't made anyone's blacklists like David Lowe? You know about David Lowe?
Oh yeah, I know about David Lowe. Well, I mean, this guy, McCausland, did something about a cartoonist for Trotskyists because I had drawn for a paper in London, Tara Galley's paper, Red Weekly. I noticed he'd put it up on a blog or something. I don't mind. I did draw for them, and it was a good paper. And I enjoyed working for them very much. That was actually, I started cartooning the international politics rather than local politics. And I did a strip called Militant Maggie, which was designed by a team within the Red Weekly offices in London. And that was great fun. We all sat around in a team working out what the cartoon would be, and then I would go off to draw it. And there were so many ideas to fit into about three pictures that I couldn't do. It was very hard and it was a very poor strip, but it was interesting. The arguments, I loved the argument. I loved the high-level argument in Red Weekly offices that happened before I went out to cartoon. I learned a lot.
Okay. And for what publication was this?
I started in Red Weekly, and then it changed and became Socialist Challenge. So I continued doing cartoons for Socialist Challenge.
This was in England, was it?
In England, in London, yeah.
Okay. If I can get like a
for an international Marxist group, there were three big Trotskyist groups really operating then in mainland GB. There was the Socialist Labour League, which was Jerry Healy's group. There was IMG, which at that stage Tariq Ali was the main figurehead in, and there was International Socialism, International Socialists, which became the Socialist Workers' Party, which, it was probably by far the biggest. The IMG was a student, mainly a student one, and they call it the official section of the Fourth International, whereas International Socialists were a sympathising section of the Fourth International, something like that.
Okay. To create your work, you of course have to stay on top of what's happening in the news. So, do you always have like you're glued to a speaker or radio or something like that?
You become very annoying. It's very irritating for people that live with you or around you when you rush to hear the news headlines, especially since you don't get much in the daily news. I read The Guardian and of course local stuff when I go online. But yeah, you have to keep on top of it, but I enjoy that. I mean, I'm a junkie, a news junkie in any case, so that's no sweat. And there is, when all else fails, you pull the international situation local or make the local situation international. And again, some funny image you grab and put it together with something very boring but relevant that's happened in the world of politics. These are all well-tried techniques, like double entendres for getting a cartoon when everything else fails. The best ones just come out of the ether. Suddenly they hit you and, that's funny, or that'll work.
Okay. Have any of your ideas ever come to you in a dream?
Maybe one or two. I think I have woken up with ideas, but generally daydreams rather than night dreams. And often while riding a bike or walking. I like cycling. I think ideas come quickly into one's head cycling. So if I'm not getting anywhere, I'll go out and get on the bike and try and think of a journey that I really ought to be doing to the shops or something. And generally things come into your head on a bike. And so I wonder if many people who write novels cycle.
I appreciate you hearing you talk about your work, but I'm also interested in your interest in cycling. Can you tell us about your collection of bicycles?
I've been obsessed with bicycles. Since before I could walk even, I think I was obsessed with the fact that people would ride bikes on two wheels without falling over and they leaned over in corners without falling over. It must have been. And a visit to the museum at Strandos and these huge Victorian bikes, I just totally grabbed me. I couldn't understand why everybody isn't obsessed with bicycles. To me, they're the most wonderful machine, most interesting. I'd just like to I would take a bike to bed with me if it wouldn't mess up the sheets. But I just, being near bikes, some people like to be near horses. I like to be near bikes. I have a few cartoons here, but not many about bikes. Because it could become an obsession.
In your home, you have a number of bikes. I know you have. Can you tell us about some of the bikes that you have in your home?
Well, I have a few. I think I have 4 penny farthings. One of them's a repro. It's just a strange quirk. I couldn't justify it or explain it. It's just an obsession.
And can you show us some of your pieces of work with bicycles in them?
Yeah, there aren't many. There's one here, I can't even remember it. What do you call him? It's Brian Cowan. I've forgotten, what was the last president of France called before Hollande, who's in trouble at the minute?
I don't know.
He's here again, and he's all over the place, and I just can't, my search engine won't tell his name. Anyway, that's him, and I can't actually remember what that was all about, although if I looked up today, that's 08. This was when we heard that the Zero was coming, and, in the middle of a More Flag protest. And that was a guy, I forgot his name, who was doing well in the World Championships. Irwin, I think, was it? Irvine.
Okay, can you tell me about the one about the Juro? Like, I'm not sure I understand it. There's like a lot of pink in the image.
Yeah, well, pink is the colour of the Juro. That is it. That's the corporate colour. It was announced with a big flourish at the same time as there were more of these dreary flag protests, and this is hoping that maybe a fun event like the Giro will somehow dilute. And this guy at the same time was doing big things in the World Championships, time trialing, I think. I've forgotten his name. He was from Newton Arts, I think. I've forgotten his name.
Okay. Ian, can you tell us about this piece of work here, the two cyclists?
I can't remember really what it was all about. That's from Hearts and Minds. This is actually I have no idea what it's about. That's the thing about Hearts and Minds. These illustrated somebody else's script, and there were maybe from 6 to 16 per episode. So some of them were done very quickly to illustrate small gaps where there wasn't a cartoon. Malachy wrote a book about cycling, and I think that may have had something to do with it. Okay. No, are we rolling?
Yeah, we are.
Well, this is the young Stuart from Mount Stuart, later Lord Castlereagh. At the beginning of his political career, politicking among his constituents, and this one actually wasn't used, of a commission I got from Brian Henry Martin of Double Band Films, a historical documentary on the life of Lord Castlereagh, as he was the most hated man both in Ireland and Britain at the time, for different reasons. Ireland because of his crushing of the United Irishmen, the amount of executions he carried out, in a devious manner in which a lot of it was done, although the programme explains a lot of that. And in England because of following Waterloo, which was a big triumph. Peterloo was the end of the end, which he wasn't really responsible for. But anyway, it was a highly enjoyable commission. It was different from what I normally do. It wasn't funny, or intended to be funny, and I was able to put a finish on it, and there was a different kind of palette. It was a winter kind of, for some reason, most of the filming was done in winter, so the cartoons also had a sort of winter feel to it.
So we're rolling.
One of the things that strikes one cartooning or illustrating international events or historical events is just how lucky I am to be doing things where I am, because comparatively I'm not in any danger. The number of journalists and cartoonists who are executed or rubbed out in other parts of the world who are in jail at the minute, and had I lived in the time when Lord Castlereagh was coming to power, I wouldn't have lasted very long. So it's quite comforting in a way to realise this. Castlereagh's era, he would have got rid of me pretty quick, I think, the way he got rid of his local Presbyterian minister, Porter, who had the temerity to make funny jibes about the Stuart family of Mount Stuart. He talked about their recently acquired coat of arms and how they were scouring the countryside around Mount Stuart in order to find enough flat surfaces on which to inscribe the newly acquired coat of arms. And he was also a United Irishman, but he was executed for that. One of the drawings here shows Porter's wife going to Castlereagh to try and get some clemency, but he wouldn't see her and went ahead and executed her husband in his full clerical garments.
Okay, Castlereagh, of course. Did you say his name was Lord Castlereagh? He became landowner?
I'm trying to think, was it Edward Stuart or John? I can't even remember his bloody name. Stuart was the family name. Mount Stuart was, near Grey Abbey is where the seat of power is, and they had the first showing of this in Mount Stuart. It was quite nice. Yeah.
Okay, and he sounds like he was a tyrant. Is that a good way of describing him?
No, the whole purpose of this was to explain that he wasn't, that he was quite, he was certainly ruthless. He believed he had to be ruthless.
Okay.
Are we rolling at the minute?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, I didn't. Okay. Sorry. One of his first letters to his father when he was in school was more or less to say that he was the top student and would soon be home to help out. It wasn't so much a supplicant child to a parent as the letter of the new whiz kid manager who would soon be running the family firm. So he was like that very early on.
Okay.
And he was apparently quite prepossessing for the age. I think he was over 6 foot tall and quite good looking, although who knows.
Okay. And can you tell us about these paintings? They were for a documentary, you said?
Yeah, well, it was John Bew, Dr. John Bew, I think it was the son of Paul Bew, Lord Bew, who wrote the script for this and presented it. And illustrations were slipped in to illustrate places where there weren't any illustrations, any pictures. So that's what I did. It was in a way similar to Hearts and Minds, except it wasn't jokes, and I had more time to finish them properly.
Okay, and the materials you use, they are paintings, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's gouache and drawing, the same as I do now for everything. No, the materials weren't any different, but I had more time to apply them, and that was good fun. I must say, I would like to occasionally, I always would like to do a weekly cartoon that I have time to put a good finish to. Although there's something to be said for quick, vigorous drawing.
Okay. Can you comment on that or tell me about it?
I'm afraid I can't tell you much. Was it Ranavan Carriage? At the time, somebody was getting out of prison somewhere by proving their Irish ancestry, or I can't remember what. This little section here, our connection with America. I always think it's strange that American presidents, one of the first rituals they have to go through is proving their Irish ancestry, and it seems stretching it a bit for Obama, but he's as entitled to do it as anybody else. There was a series called Midsummer Murders in which it was pointed out there's a distinct absence of black faces in it, and it was that happened at the same time as the project of Obama's visit to Moneygall was being put about. Barack seemed to enjoy his visit to Moneygall, both the prospect of it and the actuality, a lot better than Michelle. She didn't look as if she'd ever be a connoisseur of Guinness, and her 2 children didn't seem to like the insects in Glendalough.
Okay, that's interesting. Was there something that was commented about their children not liking the insects?
We saw pictures of them swatting at them, and they were quite unhappy.
All right.
Well, the Obamas were very well briefed as to the people they'd be meeting, and they recognised them instantly.
I don't remember it being this hot, the very colourful one there. What's happening in that one?
It was hot at the time, but it was the heat of the situation rather than the actual weather, although the weather was hot at the same time. Poor old Haas.
Okay. Is that anyone?
Wouldn't have been him. That's Richard Haas. As is this.
Okay.
The only people who actually want to live in Gaza are Israeli settlers. Palestinians who live in Gaza don't want to be there at all. They want to be back in Israel on the farms and villages that they lived in for the last 3,000 years. It shows Ariel Sharon being acquiescent in to discuss the proposition of a Palestinian statelet, as opposed to the other model, which quite some Palestinians prefer, which is the right to return, which I obviously would think is the better option. I think the Palestinian statelet would be something like 6 counties.
We're rolling.
The only people who actually want to live in Gaza, the Gaza Strip, are Israeli settlers. The Palestinian Arabs don't want to be there. They want to be back in the villages and the vineyards that they lived in for 3,000 years in what is now the State of Israel.
And can you tell us about this one?
Iris was regularly phoning the Nolan show about a psychologist that she knew who could cure and change, as she had it, gay people. So this is Iris discovering that a lot of Peter's ties are actually pink, and she's very worried about it and wants to engage some knowledgeable people in order to get Peter to have ties of a different hue, which is politically correct. On the morning of the 9th of August in 2008, the people here in the north woke up ready to commemorate the victims of the Omagh bombing. The 10th had happened 10 years before, and heard on the news that the president of Georgia, a Harvard-trained lawyer called Saakashvili, had, unlike the 28 that had been murdered in Omagh, he had murdered 1,400 of his own citizens in the capital of South Ossetia, Siskin Valley. It made the horror of what happened in the Caucasus pretty real to the people here. One of the most depressing things about the Troubles, quite apart from the human wastage and the injury and the death, is what happens in the background. I'm talking about my big passion, which is the environment and the destruction of it, both the built environment and the natural environment. It's totally unprotected. No designation means anything. The statutory bodies which are set up to protect the environment do nothing, other than maybe occasionally reward the destroyer with massive financial bribes not to do it again. Nothing stops the destruction of trees, the cutting down of trees, and nothing just stops the spraying of protected grassland, designated areas of special scientific interest. The destruction of listed buildings, there's no punishment. You can do it very little. You get away with it. And the bodies, people who come, whistleblowers who inform the statutory bodies, are treated as the messengers that they would prefer to shoot. Like the rest of the British Isles at the minute, we had an environment minister who didn't believe in global warming. Not only did he not believe it, but he didn't want us to know anything about it, so he censored the TV programs about it.
Okay.
Should probably have started with that one.
Okay.
But it's not an actual one, it's just we have, our biodiversity here is very small. We have flora and fauna, we have a much small overall number of species, and we have very few in the flora. What there is being sprayed to extinction. There's the one about fishing down the food chain. Any restrictions at all on fishing are, I suppose, not unnaturally posed by fishing interests. Notice places like Ardglass now pretty much exist on what they call, was it nafroms? It used to be fish, now it's prawns, shrimps.
Okay, I need to get in here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
We're building these fake American folk parks. At the same time, we're destroying very little remaining examples of native vernacular architecture. As a political cartoonist, there's no defined criteria for what one does or what actually a political cartoon is. But I think I tend to the school of dealing with realpolitik, that is the interests, the real motives of why people act. I've always found it very strange as to why sections of unionism seem to perpetually want to shove the Union Jack down the throat of those who don't regard it as their flag. The big truth which unionism doesn't seem to want to talk about, let alone face up to, is the fact that when a border poll does come, it's going to be Catholic votes that decide on the constitutional position, not Protestant ones. We know which way the project will vote. But if the prods want a substantial number of, if you say, nationalists, stroke Catholics, to vote to stay in the British, and as part of Britain, they're going to have to be nice to them. They're not going to do it by shoving flags down their throats.